Hello, 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 everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Tonight, I have something extra special for you. Tonight, our guest is Aimee Mackovic, three times organ transplant recipient, including heart, liver, and kidney transplant. Professor, author, and award winning poet is with us tonight. In December of 2019, Aimee received a heart and liver transplant after going into cardiac and liver failure. She then received a kidney transplant in June of 2022. She writes about her entire journey, starting with her congenital heart defect through two transplant journeys and a very lengthy recovery in her memoir, Contains Recycled Parts. Aimee is currently a professor at Austin Community College in Texas. She teaches English composition. She is also a prolific author. Her chapbooks include A Sentenced Woman, collection of poems published by Finishing Line Press in 2007, and Headlines published by Dancing Girl Press in 2022. Her full length book, Love Junkie, was published in 2017. She is also an award winning poet. She has poems published in Barbaric Yap, The Desert Woman, The Crescent, Main Street Rag, Blood Lotus Online Journal, and Red Lion Square Poetry Podcast. Her memoir, Contains Recycled Parts, My Triple Organ Transplant Journey, and The Science of Gratitude, was published in 2023 by Two Sisters Publishing, and you can also find it on Amazon.com. Aimee's on her way to New York. After the broadcast, she's going to be reading from her book, and as usual, I'm expecting a terrific reading. So please give a warm welcome to our friend Aimee Mackovic. The other thing I wanted to remind you of is that if you go to my personal page and you go to the original publishing of the broadcast on my personal page, and you got to do it before the broadcast ends because then I put up the replay. In the comments, all of my research on Aimee is there, her YouTube appearances, her prior appearance podcast with Kent Bressler. Many, many thanks to my buddy Kent. All of the links to finding her written work, including her new book, is there. So you might want to check that out. If you're going to do it soon, folks. Okay. Any rate, give a warm welcome to Aimee. Aimee, how are you?
Great. Thank you so much for having me, Jim.
Oh, it's great to have you. We already got people checking in and saying hello. So I want to remind the people that during the broadcast, all I get is Facebook user. So I don't know who you are, but please let me know who you are, and I'll be sure to give you a shout out. Um, so, did I state everything correctly in the introduction?
Yes, yes. Thank you. That was wonderful.
Okay. Please tell us a little bit about where you grew up, your educational experience, and your employment experiences.
Yes. So we moved around a lot growing up. My dad was a football coach, college and pro football coach. So we moved around. Lived in Illinois, Kansas City, North Carolina, Texas a couple of times. So we moved, every few years. So grew up, um, exploring new places, and that was fun for me. I really enjoyed getting to know new people and new places. Um, Educational experience. I graduated. We moved to Austin, Texas, the year before my senior year of high school. So I graduated in Austin from Westlake High School, and then I went to Wake Forest University. My dad had also gone there. Graduated from there in '97, and then a few years later, I went back to graduate school at Spalding University for an MFA, and finished there in 2005. So, and that is, I don't think I'm going back to any more school. Um, and then this was a low residency master's program. So while I was doing that, I was living in New York. I had moved to New York after college graduation. Well, we'll get into that. It's actually a year after college graduation. And I was making costumes for Broadway. I was a theater major, and that's kind of what I was doing, and loved it, and did that for a few years, and then kind of got into the publishing temp jobs and stuff for a few years. And I was in New York only about 6 years or so. And then I that's a, after that I started teaching online. That was my first class was around 2008 where I started teaching online, and then I eventually started doing that full time. So I've had kind of a not a straight path to teaching, but it's been great. So yeah.
Great, great. Let's talk a little bit about your transplant experiences. It's my understanding that you were born with a defective heart. Please talk to us about what it was like pre-transplant, growing up with heart issues, and what challenges, if any, you faced.
Yes, I was born with a heart defect, and to be honest, it didn't really challenge me day to day. There were yearly checkups. Um, I uh, I was a little bit different in that I didn't run long distances. I was limited in my physical activities for sure, but I was a fairly normal kid. Um, so it really didn't it really didn't impact me as much as it probably could have growing up. My parents were really kind of great about they never treated it like a disability or something that was to be feared. It was simply part of who I was and the hand I'd been dealt. So that's how we kind of dealt with it. But I still led a very active, normal uh, childhood growing up. Yeah.
Okay.
Besides the yearly checkups. Yeah.
When did your heart problems make it necessary for a heart transplant? How old were you at that time?
Yes. So my heart and liver failure came about when I was around when I was 44. It was a result of the procedure I had had 22 years earlier called a Fontan, and it was the eventual. We didn't know it quite at the time, but the Fontan was not a permanent fix. So, and we have found out since that it over the long term, Fontan procedures do cause heart and liver failure, and it's interesting because the reason it causes liver failure is just the way the procedure replumbs your heart. It puts a little added pressure on the liver. So the two organs, heart and liver, just kind of they went into failure at the same time, really over I would say over 8 9 month period. Yeah.
Okay. I understand that you had your first heart surgery at 15 months. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. Uh, I know a bit about the story behind this. So my parents, I was diagnosed with a heart defect at 1 month. So my mom took me to Stanford, ironically, um, and took me to see Dr. Shumway, who is a big name in cardiovascular medicine surgeon, and he wanted to do pulmonary banding, and I think my parents were looking for maybe hoping for a little more permanent fix. So they then took me to Mayo Clinic in Minnesota, and Dr. Dwayne Magoon said he said I can repair this. This is an AV canal defect. Uh, I can repair it. And they get in there, and he comes out after surgery, and he says, "I've done 3,700 of these, and hers is different, and I couldn't repair it." But what he did do was put a banding around it, which is the same thing that Dr. Shumway wanted to do, which I just find totally interesting. Um, yeah, so that that was kind of the story of that, how that happened. Yeah.
Wow. I, if I understand correctly, this particular repair lasted 22 years or until you were in college. Is that correct?
That's correct. It actually, at 22 years, I was graduating from college, and because all growing up, the doctors were saying, you're doing well, considering, right? You're doing well, you're doing well. Kind of if it's not broke, don't fix it. But after college, I was like, okay, I want to move on with my life. So if there's something that needs to be done, or should be done, then let's do it now. And they agreed. They said, yeah, you're fully grown. We can attempt a repair. We can attempt a better repair at this time. So that was the precipice for that surgery. Yeah.
Okay. A second attempt to repair it, the heart failed as well, if I remember correctly, leaving you with only one option, a kidney or I'm sorry, I got kidney on the brain, a heart transplant.
Well, we wouldn't know that for a while, but yes, the second surgery, it was another one of those instances where he was going to. This is Dr. Charles Fraser now, who's at Dell Children's here in Austin. He is fabulous. The center is fabulous. He was the one that to repair it, and his plan was, he said, okay, I'm going to attempt a repair, but if not, we have this Fontan procedure in the wings. And he couldn't. So that again, he gets in there. He couldn't repair it because of it would have interfered with the electrical system of the heart, and he didn't really want to mess with that, understandably. So then that's when they did the Fontan, which would eventually lead to heart and liver failure.
Okay. I understand that treatment for your liver failure was connected to your kidney failure. Can you please tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, absolutely. So basically, when I was put on the list for a heart and liver transplant, I got very sick, and was put on ECMO, an ECMO machine, which is basically a heart and lung machine, and it was meant to keep me alive until we could get a transplant. And that machine, coupled with the massive surgery, just killed the kidneys. There was kind of no coming back for them. We had a little bit, yeah. It was basically like we were waiting, but the doctors kind of like, we're not very optimistic. So yeah. So it was basically the surgery and being on ECMO is what killed the kidneys. So yeah. So that then of course necessitated a kidney transplant down the line.
Approximately when did your liver fail to the point that you needed a liver transplant?
The heart and liver, they failed at the same time, basically. When I found out I needed a heart transplant, it was within a day that they said, yep, you need a liver transplant as well.
All right, and you were listed for transplant in March of 2021. Is that correct?
Kidney transplant. Hmm.
And you were listed at Stanford.
Yes.
Okay. And where were you living at the time?
I was living I was living at my mother's house in Camino, California, which is a few hours from Stanford, which I had been discharged to there after my heart and liver, my heart and liver transplant in 2019. So I'd stayed up
Okay.
there for a while.
All right. And if I remember the story correctly, you had a nephrologist that suggested you go to Stanford because of the double transplant at the time. Do I have that right?
Well, it was Charles Fraser. So when I went into heart and liver failure here, I was living here in Austin. Went into him at Dell's. He admitted me to Dell's Children's, and once he figured out that I needed a heart and liver transplant, he doesn't do those. The center doesn't do those. I was way too sick for him, so he started reaching out, and one of the places was Stanford, Cleveland. He reached out to Cleveland Clinic, I think Mayo again, and my mom is living in Camino, California, which is just a few hours from Stanford. So that was kind of our best option was to go there.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I understand they were fairly enthusiastic about having you come, the people from Stanford.
So yes, George Louis, the who is Dr. Fraser's cohort and contact at Stanford, um, said, "Get Aimee out here. We can help her." So yeah, they
Okay.
took on a really sick sick girl.
Your heart and liver transplant occurred together, I think you told me, at the age of 44
Yes.
in December of 2019 at the Stanford Transplant Center. Um, what was that like for you initially, the transplant?
Oh, that well, learning I needed a transplant was a real shock at first. I mean, a real shock. And I think my mom told me, I think my words to the doctor were, "Are you kidding me?" To Dr. Fraser. Yeah, I was really in shock. Even though, as my mom said, it should not have been a shock. We had had discussions with 20 years prior about this, but I had gleefully ignored that. So it was a shock, but I felt very assured that Dr. Fraser was going to do his best to get me the best care. And I felt so really super happy with Stanford. I felt really, um, I felt really comfortable being there. So it was very scary, but I, I felt comforted. Like I felt I was good in good hands. So I had to trust. I had to let go and trust a little bit. You know.
Okay. I've heard you refer to the surgery as an unblocked procedure. What do you mean when you say
Yes.
unblocked procedure?
Yes, and unblock. So what it is, and this is fascinating to me, and this is why I went to Stanford as well, is because they were the only one that they are one of only maybe a few that do this in the country where they take the organs from the donor as a set, really. They take the heart and liver as a set and then transplant them as a set into the recipient. Um, so that's yes. So that was also part of the reason we're going to Stanford is because um, they were doing this really innovative kind of surgery. So yeah.
How long did the surgery last? How long did it take for them to finish?
So the doctor came in, and if my mom's watching, she can chime in with the exact times or whatever. But doctor came in um, sometime late morning, I think, and said, "Okay, we have a donor." I went, "Yes." It was maybe around noonish. We were signing papers. I went into the OR around 7 that evening, and it was about an 18-hour, 17, 18-hour surgery. So it was a long surgery.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I understand you had kind of a crowd in the OR. How many people were there? How many surgeons?
I can only guess, but I know that they had a whole heart team on one side and a whole liver team on another side of me. So um, I mean, obviously, I don't remember anything about the surgery, but there had to have been 15 to 20 people in that room, probably.
Boy, a football team and a couple of referees, anyhow.
Exactly, exactly.
Wow. Wow. Um, you are also one of the lucky people. Um, you learned a little information about your heart and liver donor. Can you tell us a little bit about her?
Yes, yeah. I wrote to them. So You have to write through UNOS, the United Network of Organ Sharing. You write through them, and they get the letter to the donor. So I did that about a year after my surgery, and I did hear back, and I found out. I'll try and keep. I don't know how public they want it, but I do know her name. I know where she's from. Her name is Kristen, and I learned about her mother. Wrote me a really lovely letter about her. She was a professional woman. She was, I think, 32 at the time when she passed, and I do know that she passed from a brain aneurysm. So I do know a bit about her. Yeah.
Okay. One of the things that I both read in your book and that I've heard you say, you use the phrase on permanent loan. What are you referring to when you're referring to on permanent loan?
Um, Generally, my organs, my heart and liver, they're not because they're not mine. I mean, you can. I mean, there's both sides. You can say, "Oh, sure, they're yours now." Well, they're in me, yeah, but they weren't. They're not my organs, and they're on. On. They're on loan until I pass away. Um, so, yeah. So that's kind of what I mean by on permanent loan.
Okay.
Yeah.
How long were you hospitalized after your heart and liver transplant?
In total, about almost 10 months. Or no,
Wow.
11 months in total. From the time I was first admitted at Dell Children's in Texas to the time I was released from Stanford. Yeah.
Okay. Were there any complications or difficulties during this 10, 11-month period?
Oh, lots of little lots of little issues, but interestingly, no rejection, no major issues related to either organ. It was a lot of little potholes, bowel obstruction, infections, that kind of thing. The biggest the biggest reason I was there for so long was because I had been put on a trach, been given a tracheotomy after surgery, and my lungs were super weak, and it just took me forever to get off the ventilator. But yeah, there was months and months of little, really annoying medical issues that would pop up that we'd have to we'd have to deal with.
Were you hospitalized during that period of time in 2020 after COVID-19 hit?
Yes, I was in the hospital, and I still remember this. It was mid March when I was still in the hospital. My mom had been with me almost every day for since October, or really no, late September. And the nurse, it was Adam. I remember his name. Adam came in with a piece of paper and said, "I'm sorry." And what it was is, so the hospital was going to be shut down for COVID, which meant that mom had to leave. Right, she couldn't visit,
Right.
and that was a tough period. I really, I liked having there. I needed to have her there, just for emotional support, but also she was my medical my medical touchstone. She talked with doctors and we hashed everything out together. So it that was tough, losing her on a day-to-day basis during that time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, shout out to mom. Way to
Yeah.
go, mom.
Big shout out to mom. Yeah.
What's mom's first name?
Arlene.
Arlene. Pretty name. I can understand why you missed her. Um, were there any precautions taken to help you avoid the virus?
Yes. I mean, during that time they were, they want you to get out and walk down the halls and stuff. And we were always masked. Yeah, all the hospital staff were masked. Everyone was masked. Yeah. The only time I didn't have a mask on was just when I was in my room by myself, really.
Okay. You
Yeah.
mentioned you were on a ventilator. I have a note to myself that says that you were on that for approximately 9 months. Is that correct?
Probably about 8.5, 9 months. But yeah, from
Okay.
yeah,
Okay. Were you on any other life-saving devices at the time?
not at that time. No.
Okay. All right. Um, Aimee, we need to talk about post-transplant depression. Did you suffer from any depression post-surgery?
Yes. It didn't really kick in until March, until mom had to leave. Um, that was when really finally because we FaceTimed a lot. So finally she intervened and had a little intervention with me and said, "Aimee, you need meds, you need to go on medication. And so finally I did. Yeah, that was a super important thing to realize, because of course sometimes when you're depressed you don't realize you're depressed. It's the other people that have to tell you that you're depressed. And I think that's what my problem was for a while. But yeah, so they started me on Lexapro, and I'm still on it. And it helped a lot. Absolutely.
Did you take part in any therapy in addition to the medication?
There was a social worker that came in from time to time to chat. It was interesting. Um, I chatted with her, but it was always strange for me when she came, because she was very cognizant of how frail and sick I was. So she was very like a little bit demure and very, very cautious. And I was like, I'm gonna be okay. I'm all right. Let's, we can up the joy a little bit. Um, but yeah, I talked to her a little bit. My whole thing was I've always been pretty good about, like, I know what's going on and I know what I need to do. But it was the first time I actually used medication to cope with it. But, and other than just talking to my friends and my mom, that was my therapy.
Okay. Talk to us a little bit about your faith and how that helped you both pre and post transplant.
Well, I grew up Lutheran. I'm not a huge churchgoer anymore, but I do believe in God. I do believe in the universe, a benevolent force, whatever you want to call it. And so I kind of, like I said before, I sort of had to put it to the universe and just kind of trust as much as I could, right? And it's one of those things, you can only control so much. So I just tried to control what I could control, and then offered up, some prayers to uh, for the stuff I couldn't control. Yeah, and that's an ongoing. That's been, my whole life really. It's uh, trying to cultivate a little bit of awareness, of some spiritual awareness. Yeah.
Okay. Talking about your recovery, which I understand was extensive and tough, you were in the hospital 11 months after surgery. What was it like when you finally got to go home?
It was great. It was amazing. It took a lot of work to get there. Yeah, I remember the day. Mom had been she had gone home to take a bunch of stuff home, but we were texting for about a week because I was doing extremely well. So she was like, she was just going to wait until I needed to come home to come back. And we were texting daily. I'm like, and it was a process, because first I had to get weaned off the trach, and then you have to prove that with 24 hours of breathing on your own. Anyway, so day finally came when she was able to come and get me, and it was really lovely. Um, we went straight back to her house. It was about a 3.5 hour drive um, back to her house, and we arrived around dinner time, slightly. I don't know, 7:38, and her partner Ralph got our bags inside, and I sat down at her kitchen table, and she made some frozen ravioli and sauce, and I had a big bowl of that, and I think it was the best ravioli I've ever had. Like, it was so nice to just be sitting at her table, out of the hospital. Yeah.
Okay. Since your discharge, how have your heart and your liver been doing?
Great. Yeah, I've been super lucky. Um, I have so far not had any rejection or anything since transplant. Um, I just had my 6 month visit with my transplant doctor a few weeks ago, and did the labs and everything, and everything looked great. So knock on some wood. Yeah, I'm doing really well right now. I'm glad to say.
Good, good. I understand that you've had 4 biopsies, repeated echoes, and stress tests. And you're also on some kind of exercise or maintenance program. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Well, I try to walk. I admit to being a little bit lax about exercise, but if I do, it's walking around my apartment complex, getting on the treadmill, things like that. Yeah, I try and maintain that as much as I can, but I can always do more. I also make sure to drink a big thing. Here, I'll show you my big thing of water every day. Big old jug of it. Um,
There's,
yeah,
there's
yeah,
mine.
exactly, exactly. Yep,
Got to get that fluid in you,
gotta
man.
get the fluid in. Yep, gotta get the water in.
All right, let's talk a little bit about your kidneys. You've told us that your kidneys failed almost immediately after your heart and liver transplant in December of 2019. Can you tell us what happened there?
Yes. So, as I said, it was the surgery along with the ECMO, being on ECMO, just kind of killed them. So it was pretty soon after the surgery that they realized that they weren't my kidneys were not going to come back. And then yes, and then I went. So then they put in a dialysis catheter, and I started on dialysis in the hospital.
Okay. And when you started in on dialysis, my notes tell me that was in January of 2020. They placed the catheter and you began dialysis while you're still hospitalized, right?
Yep.
3 times a week, 4 hours a session, and they're bringing the dialysis machine to you in your room.
Yes. Yeah, they would wheel in these two big machines. The tech would come in. They'd kind of one of them would come in, set it up, and then they'd come back later for the session. Yeah, they come right to your room, which was very nice, and it would take between setting all up and everything take about 3.5 to 4 hours. Uh, yeah, and that was three times a week.
Even after you're released for a period of time, you, excuse me, you were taking dialysis at the local dialysis center, and I'm assuming that's still by a catheter. Is that correct?
Yes, they set me up with Davita, which is, you may know, a center, which is they're kind of all over Davita dialysis centers. Yeah, and it was about 20 miles from where mom is living. It was kind of we call it down the hill, but yeah, that was our local center, and I went there three times a week.
Okay. Yeah, there's a dialysis center about 10 minutes from my apartment, a Davita dialysis center.
Yeah,
So,
yep.
and on
Yeah.
the same street, there's a Fresenius. So,
Oh.
Gimbels and Macy's on the same block.
Right.
Um, Talk to us about your kidney transplant. My notes are telling me that that took place in June of 2022, and you actually got the call around the June 12th at 11:30 p.m. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yes, yes, this is a great story. Yeah, I'd been on the list for, not too long actually, and I was at my mother's house alone because mom and Ralph had left for a few days. They went to Norman Mineta's funeral in San Francisco, and they were there. It was the night before the funeral, and we joked, and this is, I think we jinxed it because I joked about, okay, you haven't been away for years, and you guys are leaving, and that's when they're going to call. And so, sure enough, 11:30 at night, the phone rings, and actually, my mom got a little mad because I had my ringer off. I usually keep my ringer on silent, so it took her a few times to get me on the phone. And but yeah, she called and told me. But the great story is about how she found out. So Stanford called her. The organ the transplant coordinator called her, and it was 11:30. And my mom's partner Ralph picks up her phone, and the guy says, this is Stanford. And Ralph says, well, it's a little late for you to be calling, isn't it? And he says, this I don't I forget his name, but let's say this is Jim, the transplant coordinator. I'm calling for Aimee. And Ralph just immediately like, oh my gosh. gets the phone to mom, and then 5 minutes later, mom is calling me. And my first words were, "Are you kidding me?" Like,
Mm.
yeah, I was like, yeah,
I
yeah.
remember doing that when I got the call too. You wouldn't kid an old man, would you?
Yeah, I think I actually might have said a F word there too, but yeah, it was kind of a,
Okay, so you got the call on the 12th. When did the actual transplant take place?
um, the next day.
The 13th.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Um, was this a living kidney donor or a deceased kidney donor?
the deceased donor.
And we're back at Stanford again, correct?
Yep.
Now, I understand that your brother was considered as a living donor. Why did that not happen?
Well, I don't know if he really was. We kind of, mom and I kind of talked about it, but even he never went to, find out if he was a match or anything. I didn't. He has a family. He has 4 kids, a wife. I just didn't feel. I would not have felt comfortable asking him to do that. And mom and dad were, they were too old to be donors. Even if they did match, I wouldn't have let them do it either. Yeah, it just seemed, for a lot of reasons, it just seemed that just waiting for a deceased donor was the way to go for me.
Okay. Between your 3 transplants, do you have any idea of the costs?
Oh, yes, and this is kind of crazy. It was after my heart and liver transplant, many, many, many months later. We did see a bill, not that we paid, but we just saw what the bill was from Stanford, after or before it all went through insurance. And I'm a bit appalled, ashamed, and amazed to say it was about $20 million.
Wow.
I know. My brother and I, like, we were all looking at it together going, oh my gosh. Yeah.
Wow.
I
Do you
know.
have any idea the cost of the kidney transplant?
No, no, I don't. Much, much less because that was a much shorter hospital stay and all that. I do remember from seeing the bill that this is for the heart and liver, the organ procurement was around $450,000. That's one figure I just kind of like remembered. Yeah,
I'm
I know.
so glad we had coverage for that.
Right? Yeah.
Um, I take the kidney transplant went well.
It did. It was 1,000% easier than the heart and liver. In fact, we started talking about a kidney transplant while I was still in the hospital recovering from heart and liver. As soon as they knew that my kidneys were kind of shot, and I remember talking to the nephrologist, Dr. Chertow, who's one of our favorite doctors there. He's the nephrologist, and I asked him. I said, how long will I be in the hospital? And he said, I think said 5 to 7 days or something like that. And I was like, sign me up. I was like, that seems like a steal after months and months I spent in the hospital. Yeah. So yeah,
Yeah,
and it went very
after 11 months, yeah,
yeah,
that almost sounds like a day off.
exactly. Exactly. And I was only in the hospital for 5 days after my kidney transplant.
What kind of shape is your kidney in today? How are you doing kidney wise?
I'm doing well. My last creatinine was 1.3, I think, which may be a little high, but that was it keeps going down. So uh it fluctuates, a little bit. But yeah, kidneys seems to be happy.
Well, as long as they're happy, then I'm happy. And I
Yeah.
imagine you're happy.
Yes.
That's great. That's great. Um, were you able to learn anything about your kidney donor? Is that still up in the air?
I do not yet know anything about my kidney donor. Um, I need to I need to write UNOs and write them. Yeah, I would like to find out more.
Okay. I understand that in December of 23, you actually came down with COVID yourself. Can you tell us what happened?
Sure. It was just a normal day, and I think I know where I got it to. It was just the local coffee shop, and I was working, and there was two ladies sitting to my left, and one of them was coughing quite a bit, and in my head I'm going, okay. And so it was later that night I started to feel kind of a little unwell. Took my temperature. I didn't never had a fever, which was great, but I took a test, COVID test, and I was positive. But I was very lucky, and I had mild symptoms. I mean, I kind of felt cruddy. I laid low for a couple weeks, but never had a fever. Called my doctor immediately, of course, and they said, just monitor, keep us posted. If you get a fever, especially if you get a fever. Um, but I feel lucky, and it was kind of pretty mild. So it was just a lot of coughing and resting, and yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I understand now that you're acting as a post-transplant mentor for Stanford. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. Yeah. Dr. Louis at Stanford, who was one of our doctors there, before I left, he was like, would you ever consider talking to future transplant patients who are going to go through this? And I said, absolutely. So I've had a few people call me over the years, and they said, hey, Dr. Louis, gave me your number. And so we just kind of talk about, what to expect, and what they're going to go through and how they're feeling. Um, yeah, so that's been a real treat to be able to talk to someone who is going to go through it and tell them, what, it might be rough, but I'm on the other side, and you'll get through it, and you can do it.
One of the things
Yeah.
that you've mentioned that you like to do post-transplant is traveling after your 3 organ transplants. Can you talk to us a little bit about your traveling experiences since transplant?
Yes, I was a big traveler before, and so after transplant, they want you to wait at least 6 months domestic, at least a year international. So I didn't do any traveling, obviously, during 2000, 2001. Um, After my kidney transplant, I waited until the following November, and I took my first trip to see my dad in Las Vegas, and that was my first little trip. Um, and it was great. It was fine. And I've been on a few other short trips. I came to Austin that December to see friends and stuff. Um, I have actually the last few months I've been on a few trips. In February, I went to Kansas City. Um, I'm going to New York tomorrow. I went to Richmond a couple weeks ago. Yeah, so I've been lucky to be able to travel. And it hasn't it the only thing that's different for me, obviously, is, be sure to take all my medications with me, and, I take them on the plane with me. I don't put them in my checked luggage. I
Right. Right.
always carry them on, always, always. Um, and just make sure, that I'm taking at the right time, if I'm switching big time zones, but that hasn't been a huge deal. I've only, flown domestically. But yeah, so it's been kind of not kind of, it's been really exciting to get back to traveling a bit. Yeah,
Great. Great.
yeah.
Talk to us about your book, Contains Recycled Parts, My Triple Organ Transplant Journey, which is available on Amazon and Two Sisters Publishing. And folks, the links are passing by in the banners as Aimee and I are speaking. And it's also, like I said, it's also in the comments to this broadcast pinned to the top of my personal page, which you better go to before the broadcast ends, because then I start working on the replay and that becomes the top thing. But
Yes.
take my word for it. I've read this book. Go buy it. It's excellent.
Thank you. Yeah, it was really, I mean, I've been a writer my whole life, really. So I knew after a while, I knew I wanted to try and put something down on paper about this whole huge experience. Um, and it took, it took a good couple of years for it all to come together. It was It was, I laugh when I say it was fun. It was fun. Since you've read the book, you know that like I use a lot of my mother's Facebook updates, right? She was extremely wonderful to kind of chronicle everything, not only in our Facebook group where she would just keep everyone posted, but she also had a personal journal, just medical journal, right? Where she, okay, today this happened, this is what's going on. So between those two things, it was really kind of fascinating to look back on this 11-month journey that we've been on together, kind of. And then I was just filling in the parts, with my own experiences and stuff. Um, yeah, and I really kind of wanted to have a document that that said, okay, this is what I went through. This is what it was like. Um, so the others that are facing this maybe can read it and say, "Wow, okay, she went through all that. I think I can get through what I need to get through." Yeah, and if you read it, I talk a lot about my faith and a lot about gratitude. That was, I think, one of the
Mhm.
things I wanted to put in the book is the gratitude I have for the second life. Really, um, yeah.
Okay. You mentioned that you're going to New York soon. What are we doing in New York?
Yes, I'm going there on Tuesday, the 9th. I'll be reading from my book at a bar at Jake's Dilemma. It's a monthly reading series that is dedicated to memoirs. It's called Must Love Memoirs reading series. And so every month is different memoirists who come and read. So doing, I'm going there and doing that and seeing a few friends and hopefully seeing a couple of shows while I'm there. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, Amy, we're in the home stretch here. Do you have any final statements you wish to make to our audience tonight before we conclude the broadcast? Do you have any advice that you would like to give them?
Sure, absolutely. I can think of a few things. So one is, I mean, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that this was Organ Donation Month, Donation Awareness Month. Um, so please do think about checking that box when you get your license or when you get your license renewed. You have no concept of how that impacts and can save the life of not just a person, but it affects the whole family and friends, right? Um, I often tell people that it wasn't just me who had the transplants, our whole family. It was really a family and friends effort. I would not have been able to do this, on my own. So, so I just want to advocate for, organ donation and just amplify how wonderful it can be, and how much it can really change lives. Even living, they're doing wonders with living organ donations now too, with kidney and liver, and I think that's amazing. Yeah. Yeah. And then, oh, the second thing I would say was just um, be sure. And I was talking with my friend Lily when I was visiting her in Richmond a few weeks ago, is just find a little joy in every day, right? Not every day is going to be great, but there's always something that can make you smile. So I think it's important to just practice a little bit of gratitude, right? And practice joy. Doesn't often, doesn't come naturally all the time, but especially nowadays, I think we need to prioritize seeing the good stuff. You know, yeah. So that's that's what I would say.
Okay, great, great, Amy. Wow, what a broadcast this has been. This first time we've had somebody on that had 3 organ transplants, and such a terrific job that you did explaining everything and raising awareness. And I hope it gives people consolation and the ability to get through their own situations no matter what, because that's Aimee Mackovic all over the place. And just a great job. I thank you so much for
Thank
coming
you.
on and educating us.
Thank you so much for having me.
No, you're the best. This is fun. Can we do this again tomorrow?
I know, right? Mhm.
So I have a few things to button up with my audience, Aimee, so I'm going to let you go. I mean, you've given us almost an hour of your time. And again, I just want to say thank you. You did such a terrific job. And I'll be getting the broadcast replay ready, and I'll be sharing to all 100 of my groups and all of my social media platforms. And hopefully we'll get you out there and get you seen.
Thanks again.
You're welcome. Thank you. You have a good night, my friend.
You too. Thanks.
All right, folks, that's our broadcast for tonight. The great Aimee Mackovic was here, did an excellent job, and I have a broadcast set next week, so make sure you keep an eye on his space. We'll talk to you later.